Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar titled STEM That Moves, How Sports-Based Learning Supports Special Education Success. My name is Hope Warner. I'm on the marketing team here at STEM Sports, and I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm going to be posing questions to our panel about varying topics about STEM in special education. Joining me today are our three expert panelists. We have Kareem Neal, Tiffany Blaisdell Anaya, and Sean Barton, and I'm going to kick it over to them to introduce themselves, share a little bit about their background in education and what they're most excited about talking about today. So Kareem, I'm going to pick on you first. Would you like to kick us off?
Sure. My name is Kareem Neal. I have been a self-contained special education teacher for 28 years. I am the 2019 Arizona Teacher of the Year and the first Arizona teacher elected into the National Teacher Hall of Fame in 2022. And I am because I got to use the STEM sports products in class, and my students loved it so much. I actually have pictures. I wish I could share them here, but I can't just share pictures with my students. But we took pictures because it's such fun stuff for my students. We still get to use it. We got to keep a lot of the stuff, so it's pretty cool.
All right. Tiffany, do you want to go next?
Yes. Hi, I'm Tiffany Blaisdell, and I've been teaching PE for 29 years, 9 years in Texas and 10 years here. I am a national board certified teacher twice. I also teach online for Pearson Online and Blended Learning. So kind of both ends of the spectrum there. One of my favorite things that I've done here is I work to start the Unified PE program here at our school, which is a program that combines general ed students with special needs students, and they act as peer mentors. So it was really cool to be able to incorporate a lot of the STEM and sports curriculum into our unified PE classes to see how the general ed kids can collaborate with the unified PE kids to create a work product. And I think that was one of my favorite things to experience. And that's what I'm really excited about talking about with you guys.
Hi, I'm Sean Barton. I'm with STEM Sports, so we're certainly honored to be able to do this today. My background as curriculum writer with STEM Sports, going on my 6th year. Actually, the special teams player curriculum for special needs education students was our 16th curricula that we developed. And I have to say that Kareem and Tiffany were two of our piloters, outstanding teachers, supporters, advocates for STEM sports, and our ability to be able to stem the gap between STEM concepts that can be challenging and the application of sport. And I think we do that pretty well, but I love having these two as supporters and have been part of the STEM sports team. My background predominantly has been between curriculum writing, yes, but also teaching in the physical education space, coaching, athletic director, extended day program director, and summer camp program director. And some of that has also been coaching and working with special needs kids across the spectrum. So I've been honored to be able to do that, and it was certainly a drive for me in producing this curriculum about 6 to 8 months ago. So I'm excited about today's panel, and appreciate everyone being here with us.
Thank you, panelists. Before we start with our first question, I just wanted to let everyone know we will be answering audience questions towards the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions for our panelists throughout the whole session, go ahead and find your toolbar. It's going to be in the bottom of your screen, and click that Q&A button, and then we'll be able to see your questions and hopefully get to all of them by the end of the session. So let's start out by laying some groundwork. Panelists, how would you describe the state of STEM in special education today?
Go ahead, Kareem.
Okay. Well, I think it is not where I'd like it to be. Just like most things in special education, I think we are a bit overlooked. I think STEM in general is having a comeuppance, having a moment, and I love that. I just think it has been harder to be for it to be introduced in special education spaces, and I do think a lot of that is just because of the mindset of folks thinking that people in special ed programs can't do certain things, and they think of STEM like, oh, pre-engineering, and so kind of college based and things like that. But I wish they, I wish schools in general, I wish the institution of education um, kind of had better foresight and kind of broader thinking in that way, because I think it would be a super motivating tool, and motivation in special education is a big deal, just like it is, of course, in general education.
I would agree with that, Kareem. I think also in the special education arena, you're very focused on meeting goals and having data. And sometimes the lessons are more geared towards getting those data results and getting that information. And so STEM is seen as an additional thing that you have to do. And if you don't have to do it, because it's not going to directly relate, directly give you that data, then don't do it. But what I've experienced is it helps you get to those goals, using a different route. So I think sometimes people get really focused on the data that they need, and that pushes STEM to the wayside a little bit.
I would agree with that, definitely. One of the things that I think is really important that yes, we look at reading, writing, arithmetic, and some of the common core subjects, very important. They're essential to build a strong foundation for any student. But when we look at careers and where jobs are going to, they typically are within the realm of STEM, a very high percentage of it. We want to prepare, I think, every human being out there to be able to do some type of a career in the realm of STEM, because it's where jobs are going, right, wrong, or indifferent. It is what it is. So hopefully we can help bridge that gap, as Kareem and Tiffany both said. So yeah.
All right, so to follow up with that, I feel like you all sort of touched on this. What are some of the unique benefits that ensuring STEM is taught to our special education students? What are some of those extra benefits that specifically teaching STEM is going to bring to them?
Me again. Am I first every time?
Yes, let's just have you go first every time.
Okay, so I would say the immediate one that I see, and my lens might be a tiny bit different with self-contained, but I don't think it is engagement. So the thing about STEM is this perfect timing of, like Sean said, oh, jobs. It is like what the world is moving towards, but it also is fun. So it's not one of those subjects where it is, yes, this will be good for your future, so suffer through it so that you can have this good future. It is, this will be good for your future, and also this will be a thing that will help you engage with materials. And most importantly, for folks like the ones in self-contained, I think I brought that up a second earlier, is that there's a lot more hands-on things. And if you don't have those, you do lose a lot of learners who just, their attention spans. I think a lot of people know about things like ADHD and things like that. Those are commonplace in special education classrooms. And so you need something that you can get your hands on often, and so it's important in that way.
I would agree with that, and I would build on that a little bit, in that I think that STEM brings so much relevance to other things that are taught in the classroom. Just the fact that, okay, well, we're doing math. Okay, well, let's go take math outside. Let's use, math concepts to do these other things. And then they're like, oh my gosh, that's why we're learning it. So I think it brings a lot of relevance. I think there's a huge transfer of learning that happens from just sitting in the classroom, because a lot of the things that you do with STEM, you're not sitting. And, we all know, everybody on this panel knows that, kinesthetic movement is one of the best ways to learn things. So I feel that incorporating STEM lessons just creates that transfer of learning that makes the classroom concepts really come alive.
It does. I completely agree with that. And I think that cross-curricular learning, trying to, as a former IB teacher, trying to somehow, link all subject matter together, STEM does that pretty well for the most part, more or less. So it's an essential, it goes back again, as Kareem said, and I said, to preparing our young people with a litany of skills. And that skill set, if you have STEM, some of those initiatives in place, those students are able to touch a little bit on one of those pieces, whether it be science, some form of engineering, some form of math.
Mhm.
It's going to serve them well as they mature and move forward post-secondary and into their careers.
Right, so it sounds like there's a variety of benefits here, right? So what are some of those roadblocks or challenges that special education teachers run into when trying to implement STEM?
Can you repeat the last part? Sorry. Or
Yeah, so we know how important all of teaching STEM is for our special education students, but what are some of the challenges or roadblocks you might be running into when trying to implement it with your students?
so we really are going with it. Okay. So I'm first again. So the biggest roadblock is that there just aren't as many tools out there for us. So like I can't just go and look at a standard high school's physics curriculum and take that and use it for my students. It wouldn't work, you know? And so and then I don't want to then look at like pre-K and kindergarten level stuff because then it is not fair. And it, you know, it is insulting to my students. And so, you know, because of this balancing act that you have to look for, it's just really hard to find actual materials for it, you know. And you know, when Sean asked me about being part of the pilot, like I think, you know, Tiffany's gonna attest to this, and all teachers probably can feel that way, like, oh, we got enough stuff, I'm gonna have extra stuff to do. But it was like this extra stuff that I knew my kids were gonna love and engage in, and that they need it. And so, and like I said, I still have, so now I have it, and so I'm good there. But it would be nice if it was just a ton of stuff out there for
Yeah.
special ed students and all students. I don't know what it's like for gen ed students, but we just don't have enough stuff. You know, we don't have enough opportunities, enough curriculum for it. You know, and even if you, because like, you know, all teachers could find, like a couple years ago I got the Lego engineering stuff. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that. It's amazing. But it doesn't come with necessarily curriculum that worked for my students. So I basically was like, okay, we're doing this Lego curriculum. Now I got to also then figure out a way to, you know, do all the stuff that comes with it. So it would be nice to have, you know, but a lot of curriculums out there, you know, it's a roadmap for you. And
Yes.
that's what I wasn't seeing. So it would be nice to have that.
I agree with that. I'm coming from a more practical sense because, you know, Kareem, you're in the classroom and I'm like in, you know, space all over the place. So some of the blocks that I could see that special ed teachers could run into would just be like logistics, like time. When are you going to have time to put these lessons in? Equipment, you know, like if you have a class of 30 and you're all working on golf, you know, how much golf stuff do you need and where are you going to store it? Space, like for me, that was not a problem because I've got a ton of space. But then just to piggyback on what Kareem said, just having the curriculum there. So when I'm teaching basketball and we're working on the skills, then you can put a STEM lesson into basketball, you know, in your unit that you're already teaching, and the kids are already in the basketball mode. So it's almost like they don't even know that they're learning, you know, they don't even understand, you kind of sneaking it in there. If you can secure the space and you have the equipment, and then you can figure out the time and figure out when the lessons that are supplied in the curriculum that we piloted fit into the units that you're already doing. It's kind of like the magic combination. But I can definitely see if, you know, if you have nothing to work with, you're kind of don't know what's, you know, you don't know what you're missing, I guess, until you actually see the curriculum, like, oh my God, I could put this here and I could put that there. So I really think it's like you don't know what you're missing until you open it up and you're like, this is great.
I think all good points. I like that Tiffany touched on the physical literacy side of it in order for students to better grasp the challenge of STEM at any level, whether it be special ed or gen ed. And so that is a key part of it. And preparation, planning time is critical, and the space that you're actually in. And the other part of it, I think, is how the curriculum was developed and written. You know, using, as you guys pilot our curriculum, using Common Core standards, those standards are designed to have fewer standards and simplified standards for special needs education students. So that's key as well, to not really muddy the waters and ensure, hey, this is pretty literal, straightforward, for our students to be able to understand. And of course, there is the instructional method and approach, the scope and sequence of a lesson and what that looks like to, again, be able to reach your students and a variety of students, because we know there's the spectrum is quite wide when we're talking about special education. So it's really critical, yes, that resources that's around STEM are literal, they are simplified, and again, that physical literacy piece, as Tiffany spoke to, does a very good job of, again, bridging that gap, to say, hey, I just learned something playing basketball about statistics, basic
Right.
division. And so it's things like that that we do, that I think, helps. And yeah, I agree that the more resources out there, the better, and the more engaging for all students on all levels, the better. But we hope to continue to bridge that gap, that challenge with STEM resources.
So let's push on that topic just a little bit. Are there certain strategies that you all could offer for educators that they can use to adapt STEM activities for their students with varying levels of abilities? And let's flip-flop here. Sean, you go first this time.
It kind of, again, goes back to looking at, and not going too deep into our curricula and what we offer, but it really is about providing something that removes the rigor around STEM. When you look at terminology around STEM, you look at let's just take the engineering design process. We simplify that using something that's a physical apparatus or an application, like sports, for example. Let's say you want to discuss in football the importance of systems of the brain and concussion. We look at that from the science side of it, pretty straightforward for students. But then we look at it on the side of it of football, which everyone likes to watch, everyone enjoys most like the game of football, American football. And then they look at, injuries happen, they understand that. How can we help mitigate those injuries, which many professionals do that. We have a lot of people that engineer and design helmets on both the technical side, the engineering side. And so for example, if we look at the engineering design process from start to finish, how do I design something, draw something, and then put it into a prototype, build it into a prototype using just basic materials for students to really understand and see, which is actually creativity. There's no difference. It's very artistic that you're building a prototype, something designed, and as working as groups. With SPED, obviously, it's very important that they're able to also socialize, respect for self and others, work together collaboratively. That's another important part, I think, of being able to support these students in a very challenging and rigorous subject matter as STEM goes, and that literacy side of it. And something as challenging as engineering and the EDP, you can simplify that by approaching it as, okay, here's something, a sports piece of equipment. Now let's see, how does an engineer develop and look at that? And as we mentioned from the beginning, our vision is to be able to prep anyone for a career, and they can see themselves being an engineer tech, someone who's hands-on building sports equipment, things like that. Again, that really, I keep using this term, but bridges the gap of that challenge because of the hands-on physical piece.
I agree with that. I wrote down a couple of things as the question was being asked and as you were talking, Sean, and one of the struggles with adapting a curriculum to a certain classroom, it lies in the teacher, and your students better than anybody. And what pieces you need to add in and what pieces you need to take out and where you need to expand. What prior knowledge they need to bring to the table. So I feel like putting that responsibility on the teachers to just tweak, here and there and put the lessons in when it's applicable. I think that's super important. And I think that's one of the key pieces to this particular curriculum, because it's not overwhelming. It is something that can be used to enhance the current curriculum. And then I wrote something else. I was like, through the lens of fitness. So we're looking at it through sports. We're looking at it through fitness. So through this lens of fitness, students can be exposed to these STEM concepts that they can use, later on, that have these real world applications. So I think as a teacher, you look at your students and what's your goal down here, and use STEM to get them there. Use STEM and sports to get them there. And that's what I think is the most applicable thing for the teachers. What do you think, Kareem?
Yeah, I mean, I want to put a period at the end of your first thought, because it is, special education teachers really get a chance to know their students well. And so they will be able to tweak available curriculum, right? And so that's why the fact that we just don't have a lot is the real problem. I think with a curriculum tool, I mean, the STEM sports curriculum is amazing, and it is already kind of laid out so that we can all do it relatively easily, which is nice. But even if it wasn't, we would have figured that out, because we do know our students pretty well. It was just much easier to figure it out, having a tool like that. But I do say I trust in special education teachers, and I know that we can adapt all curriculum. I mean, I teach world history to self-contained special ed students who read at about kindergarten or first grade level at max. And I mean, I use AI to change articles from a Britannica.com article to boom, now it's a Britannica.com article that is on a kindergarten level reading, right? And so obviously with tools that students get to work with their hands and things like that, I trust in teachers to be able to do it.
Well said, Kareem. I know I said I was going to hold audience questions to the end, but I got an interesting one that I think sort of kind of fits into what we're talking about for this specific topic. And Tiffany, I'm going to throw it to you first.
I was going to have to go first.
One, because it's your turn to go first, and two, because I think it kind of plays into a lot of what you do. So the question is, how can special education teachers collaborate with general education STEM teachers to create an inclusive learning environment?
Okay, that's a great question. That's something that kind of happened when we designed the unified PE program here. And based on your district, there's those opportunities. The first thing I would say is find your person. Find your person. Find somebody that's in science or that's in math that is very amenable to all the needs of special needs students and is ready to go. You got to have your friend. You got to have your partner, and then together figure out how the lessons are going to fit. Try a few things out. Bring, if Kareem and I were working together, hey, Kareem, bring your kids over here. We're going to try this. Find your person. If you don't have that person, then just start looking around. Maybe it's not necessarily a teacher. Maybe it's a paraprofessional that, that's really gung-ho on trying something different. Maybe it's an administrator. And once you, try it, once you try it a couple times, get your administrators to come out and witness it. Because then once you get that buy-in from the administrator, now you can start talking about creating classes and creating programs. But I would definitely say find your person. When I started with the unified PE here, I had an adapted PE lady that was like, hey, we want to do this. And we just clicked and we went to town. What do you think, Kareem? I see you nodding your head over there.
Well, I love when you said find your person was the first thing, because there's no way that you're just going to get a standard general education teacher who has their full caseload to just get down with you and be like, sure, I'll take extra time to work with you. So finding your person was the first thing. But I think another thing that you touched on, I talk a lot about around the country, actually, and that is we need more class swapping. And so not just, so what happens a lot is in schools, general education teachers invite special ed classes to their class to have like a party. Watch a movie, we have snacks, and that's it. And so what I will do with my general ed colleagues who I have found as my people, say, I would like your students to come and watch my students do actual learning though, not just we're not watching the video in my room or putting together the popsicle houses in my room.
Right.
You're gonna see my kids learning in my physical science class. I teach physical science and world history. And then my students and I will come and watch your students teach physical science in your class. So now we all understand how our students learn, right? Now it will be much easier for us to now adapt a material so that we can work together well, right? You now understand the needs of my students. I now understand the needs of yours. Our students are now comfortable working together, being in a room together. That's not even an easy thing sometimes with general ed and special ed. And then all the magic happens.
I agree.
Yeah, great stuff. And it made me think of something that we get asked a lot. STEM sports, matter of fact, we asked 2 days ago, what do you guys have, a high school curriculum? Like, well, we've been pretty busy with pre-K through 8th grade. But I usually say to them, one of the things that has been used with our curriculum in particular is mentoring our younger students. And that's where I see, as both Kareem and Tiffany have put so well, is a mentorship, leadership for students who aren't as comfortable, aren't as confident from the gen ed to the sped space. And again, it ties into those 21st century skills, leadership, collaboration, working as a group and together, as Kareem just said. That takes time. But I think over time, you're going to see the magic happen, and they're going to see them exercise some of those 21st century skills, things that are applied to the real world, the working world. And that's a win-win situation. So great feedback from both of you.
Right, let's switch gears just a little bit and jump into more of the sports-based learning. So I guess to start, like, what makes sports-based STEM lessons particularly engaging for special education students? And perhaps if you can explain or give an example of what exactly we're talking about by these sports-based lessons, I think that would help give some context too.
Okay, can I go first on this one? I love talking about this. So kids like to move. They're stuck in a classroom 6 hours a day. Kids like to move. We here at our school, we've expanded our PE program because kids want to take PE for both of their electives. So we're encouraging them to move. And the more they move, more movement is related to better test scores. So if you can get the kids out of the classroom and get them out on the football field, timing each other on 50-yard dashes, or out on the sports courts, shooting basketballs, they think they're just shooting baskets and they think they're just running races. But you're like I said, you're sneaking in that learning in there. You're sneaking in the learning about statistics, as Sean talked about speed and, kicking a soccer ball into a goal, about force and trajectory. You're sneaking those lessons in and they think they're having fun, but they're actually learning. We even did one when we were in our golf lesson. We designed a golf course, design a hole in one. And they're like, this is so cool. And we're like, okay, but let's talk about trajectory. And you got to hit the ball, it's got to go around that curve. So do you want to hit it super hard? And they're like, no, you want to hit it really light. Now we're talking about force. Now, oh, well, where you got to hit it to make it stop right here so you can get it over there. Now we're talking about angles, but you're getting them to move. So the sports-based learning is really what solidifies those classroom lessons and those database lessons for the kids that I've had. What do you think, Kareem?
Pretty much the same. So, one of the things we did, it was like, shooting free throws, which my kids like to do. It is accessible to almost every student I have, other than I have one student who requires the use of a wheelchair. And so, boom, shooting the free throws. And it is like they learn in their math class. I'm not their math teacher, but the next door teacher is. And they're learning about fractions now. And it was just like, how many free throws did you shoot? 10. How many free throws did you make? 1, because they're a bad free throw shooter. And it's like 1/10, bing, there goes your fraction. And so that is going to stick in their head more than the 5 times that their math teacher told them, how to form fractions and what a fraction is and all of that, because they were a part of it, And so, and that will be the same. That actually is not just a special education concept. That is a concept that would be the same for all people. If we are in the middle of something, it is resonating for us. Like when I think about all the lessons I learned in my life and all my schooling, most of it is not in my head anymore. All of it that I am a part of right now is still in my head, and then I've enriched it and I've gotten better at it. So yeah.
Yeah, spot on. You know, it's, I think as Tiffany said from the outset, it is, kids need to move. We did when we were kids. Now, I mean, for me, I'm getting old. Playing basketball is very tough. I feel it. Still, I can move, but when I was younger, you have a lot of energy, and it is something that is just going to increase that engagement so much more. And if even something that can be as comprehensive as STEM, and the one example that they both used, Kareem and Tiffany both used basketball. Yes, that's certainly one. The other Tiffany had used was designing, you know, how to design basically a hole so you can make a hole in one. Basically, your challenge is to, you know, how do I, you know, make the ball so it goes in the hole? The challenge is the ball not going in the hole, making the hole in one. So designing a course, a hole, and where the ball is going to move is going to, that's engineering. You're designing and you're engineering a hole. And then as far as movement, and then what that takes, those movement patterns as far as using, you know, your body to actually either less or more force, using your upper and lower extremities to generate force and acceleration. Again, it hits on all those concepts. And then the other part that's really important is them seeing it, yes, but also supporting visuals. Previously, we brought up resources. What's one thing that is key when we talk about for all students, but the visuals.
Mhm.
And having that visualization of how it's taking place, you know, within a curriculum, within a certain pages of curriculum and movement, that is extremely important. So in sports, most of it is movement. So when you see me, you know, throwing a baseball as a pitcher, as we do have a lesson on that, less versus more acceleration. Again, you're seeing the body actually move using lower upper extremities versus less acceleration and velocity. So I'm measuring that speed. So when they see that visual, not just themselves doing it, they see it in front of them.
Mhm.
Again, they really do begin to connect the dots, and that application of hands-on, whatever the sport may be, it brings it full circle of understanding those STEM concepts.
Have a short time left with us because you have another class to go teach.
Yes.
So I have one more question, and if you want to go first, and then you can
Okay.
scoot out. But thank you so
Okay,
much for
thank
joining
you.
us. We appreciated all your input. Okay, so for some educators who haven't used any sports-based learning in the past, what's like a suggestion for a small, manageable way that they can incorporate some of that into a lesson moving forward?
Okay, my first piece of advice would be do something that you feel comfortable with. If this is not something you do all the time, do something that you feel comfortable with, because the kids are going to read right through you if you're out of your comfort zone. So, you know, if maybe you're not a big sporty spice, maybe you're a walker. Okay, great. Take them out and walk. Let's start measuring steps. Let's start measuring distance. Let's start measuring, you know, gait, things like that. If you're a walker, then do that. Find something that you're passionate about, that you can teach. You're not having to teach yourself how to do the movement. You already know how to do the movement. You're not like, don't pick up basketball if you don't know how to shoot basketball. And then figure out a way, you know, there's little things that you can incorporate. Like I said, with walking, figure out gait, speed, distance, time, and use those things to create a STEM lesson, or to introduce those kids into that kind of environment.
All right. Well, thank you, Tiffany. I know you have to run. We appreciate your
All right,
time.
thank you guys.
Thank you so much,
Bye,
Tiffany.
Tiffany.
Bye guys.
All right, Kareem, let's send it over to you. What do you think are some small, manageable ways teachers can start incorporating sports into their lessons?
Yeah, I think it is, you know, based on what you're teaching. I think high school lends people, we know that you're not teaching all lessons. So based on what you're teaching, figuring out what matches with that first and foremost, of course. Obviously, if you're a science teacher, all of it's going to match really well. If you're a math teacher, all of it is going to match really well also. But I think about, like, you know, whether it be being an English teacher or a history teacher that involves, you know, lots of reading or lots of researching or whatever it is, to also say, okay, you know, we're doing this thing on basketball. I think of basketball a lot because I play a lot of basketball as well. But you know, you can incorporate ways to find readings about basketball or free throw shooting or the history of basketball for history and things like that. So, you know, figuring out ways to connect things shouldn't be too difficult for teachers. And I think, you know, the biggest part is having this curriculum tool that is actually going to excite your students. And so everything comes easier after that. I think the majority of our planning is to try and find lessons that will engage our students and teach them something. And so, you know, just having that tool in itself is going to be helpful, but, you know, just figuring out how it matches what you do.
No, both and both from Tiffany's perspective to Kareem. Yes, I agree. You do want it to be something you're comfortable with. You do have confidence around. She's absolutely right. So one of the things I love about kids, you know, my former students, they can read right through things, and I think that's a great thing. So make sure it's something you're confident with. I do think that, you know, Kareem was saying that the implementation is one thing. The implementation has to be something as it pertains to sports that your students are going to be comfortable with. You know, certain groups of students I had, the dynamics varied as far as what they were going to be engaged around, what they were going to enjoy. So I would, you know, adjust things in class for them to ensure. It may not have been sports, for example, may not have been basketball. Maybe they were more interested in hockey versus basketball, or soccer versus American football. So some of it is just you know, listening to your students and then applying, you know, so subsequently they're going to learn and engage even more so. And I do think that's certainly very important when it comes to STEM. And again, the academic challenges and rigor that STEM can bring, ensuring that that application is something that first and foremost you're comfortable with, and in turn your students will be as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think authenticity is very important when starting the sports-based lessons. Sean, it is your time to shine. We're going to jump into a little bit of information about STEM sports curriculum specifically. And Kareem, I know you know it too, but I'm going to throw this first one to Sean. Tell us about the STEM sports special teams curriculum. What's the goal of the curriculum, and how was it designed specifically to meet the needs of our special education students?
You know, I think today's discussion was great because it really encompassed everything that we are about in supporting and really that full scale, the full spectrum of students in which need, or just simple like learning support, to students that need the physical adaptive side of it. They need the full support. Our curriculum does that. You know, the objective going into that curriculum was, and this is where Kareem was so critical, and why I love having on this call, was how though do we, you know, that span of K through 12, how do we do that without them knowing it? Meaning, you know, whereas K1 and 2, you know, level, and we do have a curriculum K1 and 2, but we have to adapt it in a way that the students are going to be challenged at the high end, yet the students on the lower end can still somewhat understand some of the most basic concepts centered around STEM because of the physical, fine motor skills, spatial awareness, those types of things. Simple collaboration, peer work, using their senses. That's a key part, obviously, in special education, is students using their senses again to be able to take it a step further academically. And that's a key part of what our curriculum does so well, too. Matter of fact, our curriculum, all curricula that we have as a capstone project, which is project-based learning. And that capstone for the special teams player curriculum is all about using your senses. And so, and it is using the senses to better understand the world of STEM. And it is, with the exception of taste, they will utilize all their senses, again, to really fully understand, and not just in the capstone, but that encapsulates it well, but throughout each lesson, again, to really grasp some of the most challenging things that you know, we see within STEM for students. And I don't want to, you know, negate the physical side of it, the physical literacy piece of it, the activity level, kids being active, kids moving, that's extremely important. But our curricula, as all of it does, especially the special teams player curriculum, it's moving with a purpose. It's hands-on with a purpose. You're going to transcend skills that you're going to learn from STEM because of the physical movement, hands-on nature of it to the real world. And that's our end goal. And I think our curricula, even the special teams player curricula, does a very good job of that. And again, I so appreciate the pile of feedback that went into it. And I'll lend it to Kareem, who was a great advocate and supporter of that.
Yeah, and so, you know, for me it's well adapted. And obviously, like Sean said, well, it played a little part, tiny part, and I didn't write any of it, but I, you know, was just like, oh, I think this might be such a difficult concept or something like that. But it is just really inclusive, which is, you know, the name of the game in education. I know inclusive might not it might be a bad buzzword nowadays, but in terms of education, it's amazing, right? You want inclusive environments, you want students to be able to excel, because it might be the thing that you say, oh man, I have a student who does learn a bit better than we thought, and perhaps is ready to jump into a gen ed math class or science class or something like that, because, you know, because of how important motivation is, having a curriculum tool that one is, it's very, you know, the special teams player very easily read, very easily put out there for the students. And so you then have the opportunity of seeing a student who just like, oh, thrived here, didn't realize it, because when I write these problems on the board, you know, he blanks out and is, you know, bored silly, and now is not, and we realize, wow, has some math acumen or some science acumen, and perhaps is ready to go to a different level. Perhaps, you know, all of a sudden in the future, maybe jobs are looking different now because we realize that there's more skill than we thought prior. So yeah, it's a great tool. It is something that I hope lots of special education teachers get a chance to get their hands on and see, because I can't imagine that like every single teacher I feel like that I know in special ed, and I know a lot, would be happy to use curriculum like that's hands-on and that is easy to follow.
All right, so maybe explain kind of how the curriculum is laid out. I mean, how many lessons are in it? How much support does the curriculum need from teachers or aides in order to implement it? Can maybe just give a bit more specifics?
Sure. So one of the first things to understand about our curriculum, and we look at the instructional method model that we use, and it is really universal as far as reaching all students, you know, at every level, is what's called the 5E model method, which is engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And is a contemporary model that particularly is designed to for a curriculum like ours, where it is physical in nature, which, you know, creates that engagement, yet there still is, you know, that step back of, okay, let's think around certain terminology that relates to STEM, and, you know, as an instructor, having an instructional time, but coming back into the physical side of it between a couple of those E's. It's just a very intuitive method. I'm guessing we have teachers, instructors, aides on this webinar who have probably experienced or used the 5E method. We have a 6E of extend, and again, when I talk about, you know, reaching the full spectrum of SPED and all students for that matter, we're talking more probably those students who do need that challenge, more closer to on the higher level academically, maybe gifted students. The extend is basically a window into the next grade level, our 6D, maybe extra credit. Again, and it takes them from what they just learned, those first 5 E's, standards at that grade level, to the next. So again, it is continuing to move forward, continuing to progress. The other piece of it is from the teaching side of it. When we talk about special education, verbalization is going to be very important, or at least having that option, versus when we think of worksheets and having handwritten, because we do a lot of informal and formal experiments on the field, on the court. So being able to You know, yes, if you do have a clipboard, great, you're working in groups and you can track and record outcomes. However, there are times that you have students who cannot physically do that. And so verbalization is key as well. And that's certainly something in our curriculum as you follow through, you know, through a worksheet, you can do that. And we write it in a way where I simply say, you know, if unable to record with paper and pencil, please verbalize the lesson. It will be effective as well. So, all lessons, of course, we do incorporate the standards from the outset, the concepts, a duration, a baseline that comes from our piloters saying it takes about this much time per lesson. And again, they cover the full scope of usually you have about 2 lessons of science, engineering, and math. Always the physical component. The technology piece is usually around advancement. So are they using a piece of sporting equipment that's continued to advance in sports, like wide receiver gloves, things like that. And in golf balls, we have a golf curriculum. So that's more the technology side of it. The curriculum for special education is 8 lessons. And those lessons are a minimum of 16 hours of instruction. That's a very much a minimum. You can get much more out of it. With the final capstone project, because it is project-based learning, it can go for, you know, 3 or 4 hours or 3 or 4 days. It can be, it is that it's that comprehensive. You can actually be it's very scalable. You can be very creative with the capstone project. So I hope that's given a decent overview.
The only thing I can add, because obviously I can't add much to that, but the only thing I can add is that when we did it, we were kind of time crunching and we were trying to run through all 8. But the paraprofessionals who work in my class, there are 2, were able to access it just as easy as I was. And so I think that was a question earlier. I heard that somewhere along the line today and wanted to make sure that if folks are out there listening, that they have paraprofessionals who work in their classrooms or they are a paraprofessional, just as easy for them to do it without me needing to, you know, go over it with them tons of times, right? We read through it together at the afternoon that I got it, like after school that day. I think he gave it to me like second hour one day, but after school that day. And then I was like, we got to jump into it because it was near the end of a school year. Am I wrong, Sean? Or either right before a break. It was near the end of the school year. So we just didn't have many weeks left. And so I was like, so we got to jump to it. And we did. It was like one read through together. And then we all dove in. So so don't worry if that is one of your concerns, don't worry about that.
And Kareem did a great job of getting through as many as he could, you know, and we always like to get the feedback again from both subject matter, physical side of it. So one of the things to note as far as is going back to that implementation to application side of things, we simplify that with the curriculum having the applicable materials as far as sports and academics. That certainly helps as far as implementation. And again, we certainly respect, acknowledge as former educators, teachers' time is very valuable. So we try to make that be simple with the necessary materials right there at hand per lesson and from the outset. And again, so you can plan accordingly. So.
All right, we have one more question and then we're going to jump into some audience questions. So if anyone has any last minute questions they want to submit, find that Q&A button and get those in. Okay, so if a teacher has a curriculum already in place that's aligned with some of these core subjects, how and where do you incorporate STEM sports? Does it have to take over the other curriculum or can you kind of mesh them together? Kareem, I see you shaking your head. So let's start with
Yeah, I figured I would dive into that one. So I mean, one, with my physical science materials, it didn't match at the time because where we are in the school year, right? You have a curriculum for the year and we weren't, you know, at the spot that I think it would have matched perfectly with, but it matches so well with all science curriculum. I can't see that being a problem for science teachers ever, really. So that was easy, right? It was very easy to be like, remember we talked about this? All right, we'll dive into that, right? And you know what you're doing in your math class right now, you know, because I know they're math teachers. However, for folks, so like there's probably some teachers out there like me who's like, oh, world history is kind of my jam. This is what I teach. you know, the most of the day. But I felt like, so we have advisory, which is like a study hall or something like that. Almost all schools have it now, some form of it, because it is like an enrichment of learning type period. And so we used advisory to do it because it, you know, it is easy to make the case to whoever, right, principals or whatever the case may be, like, this is enriching because, and it is very easy. At one, it's laid out for you right there. You can be like, I can show you why it's easy. But for me, it was use the time in advisory to jump into the skills. My students also have PE, so the PE teacher was gracious enough to do some stuff during PE time as well. But I think even if you don't have a period that you think coincides, like if you are truly all history all day, which some high school teachers might be or something like that, you can do advisory, you can do when you need to get up and get out, and then find ways to tie it in. Like I said earlier, you can talk about history too, just, you know, it might be the history of the sport that you're doing it on or something like that, and then do something on a timeline and those kinds of things. So you do have the time, but I love it for advisory for the folks that don't teach science or math, because it is enriching to all things, right? It is movement, it's enriching to all things. STEM is enriching to all things. And so it can always be used no matter what you're teaching.
Good points. I think I used the word prior, universal. And our curriculum is pretty versatile. I would say, you know, in stepping back and looking at when I was teaching, I was more in an independent school system. The IB, you can be a little more creative as far as your planning, a little more liberal versus when you have a district in place and you need to meet certain benchmarks academically with the core curriculum. The planning process is so important. So if I was to look, and I'm still in the classroom teaching, I was someone who certainly planned ahead when I'm looking at you know, subject matter and where I want to tie things into during a particular semester, particular month. It's something in which, yes, I could take a lesson. Let's say it's a lesson that may last for 2 days, and I can incorporate that into a week. Let's say I wanted to incorporate looking at cross-curricular. And when I was teaching, I did a 5-week session within the game of golf. One of the things we looked at was angles, geometry. When you look at clubs, flight of the ball, a lesson like that, such as STEM sports has, I would incorporate that. So I would pinpoint those lessons, review them ahead of time, and integrate those, again, to be able to meet those independent school standards or district level standards.
We only have a couple minutes left, so we're gonna do one audience question here. How long are the lessons in your curriculum and can they be reused year after year?
Absolutely. That's one of the nice things with our curriculum, long shelf life, and it does get used year after year. Of course, we have partners and users in all 50 states who reuse our curriculum. It's been purchased everywhere, and the feedback we receive is very good as far as that goes, because again, obviously, you have new students that come in. So looking at time per lesson, you know, again, as I said, the minimum when you look at the full curriculum per grade band, so again, it's offered 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and then 6th, 7th, and 8th, that's predicated on standards, and K1 and 2 is a standalone curriculum, and then the special needs curriculum is the full scope of K through 12. But when looking at that, I would say the duration time frame of a lesson to get through is typically around 2 hours. I would say, give or take. Again, let's say you're looking to extend that time a little bit. Depends on, you know, the program you're in. If you're looking school day versus extended day, summer camp program, you know, you can extend that out because of the sports piece of it. I'm going to actually add in this many more double the reps that students are taking to better understand, let's say, the concept that we're trying to work on within science. So that can actually, you know, extend that time if you want to. It's certainly scalable. So, but to give you kind of a mean time, I would say somewhere around an hour and a half to 2.5 hours is kind of where I would say.
And if I can interject just a tiny piece, you can do, because periods are usually 50 minutes for schools like that. Each piece has multiple parts to it. So you can, get through, you don't have to worry about needing one whole hour and a half. I think you said, right, Sean?
Yep.
It can be broken up very easily based on just reading the curriculum document.
Yep, and one of the things we do, and I think Hope, you kind of spoke to one of the questions around resources is at STEM sports, even though the 5E model is very intuitive in nature and easy to teach you the way we wrote it. Professional development often, which we do for teachers, myself and my other curriculum writer, is going through those 5Es and how do you segment that to meet the time. And again, it's going to vary between school day, extended day programs, but we go through that to be able to really strategically plan effectively with your students. And again, it depends on what the program is and what level. So, but a good question as far as is what does that time look like? How do I plan around that? But we can segment that and break it up as Kareem just said.
That was great clarification. Well, we are at the bottom of the hour here, so I'm going to wrap it up quick. Thank you, our panelists, and to Tiffany as well for joining us and sharing all of your insights and strategies today. I think we had a really great discussion. Thank you to everyone in the audience for spending your Valentine's Day afternoon with us. Following the webinar, you're going to get an email from us that will have this recording. So if you want to rewatch or send it to your colleagues, please feel free. We'll also have some additional resources in that email so we can continue this important discussion. We hope to see you next time for our next webinar. Everybody have a great weekend.